Okay, this is Friday morning around 7:30 a.m., 7:37 a.m. Eastern Time on October the 9th. So we're going to look briefly at three different pairs this morning. I'm going to look at the two pairs that have obvious downtrends. That would be the British pound versus the Aussie, which you can see is in a very bearish intraday trend at the moment. US dollar, Canadian dollar, also in a very bearish intraday pattern, and both of those look to continue so far. And then we're going to look at the New Zealand dollar, Canadian dollar, which I'm expecting to get a little bounce here and possibly go higher. So let's start out by looking at the, actually before we start out, when I flip over to the two pairs I mentioned yesterday, the British pound versus the Japanese yen, that did continue higher, but I'm expecting to see some resistance in that pair. I mentioned the overhead Kumo here, overhead 16-hour Kumo also. And the British pound versus the US dollar, even though the US dollar is very weak at this point, I'm still expecting to see some overhead resistance in that one as well. And as if you may have noticed, the 4-hour Coppock curve is bearish here on the British pound versus the US, and on the British pound versus the Japanese yen, it is bullish, and we have that bullish context occurring within the context of that daily bullish Coppock curve. But again, I am expecting some overhead resistance, so we'll see if that pans out or not. All right, drilling down quickly to our two pairs I'm looking at. British pound versus the Aussie dollar, very bearish. You can see where Chiku is below the daily historical price curve, very bearish. Divergence here in our Coppock curve on the daily and on the 4-hour. So we have a trend within a trend is what I call that. So a bearish divergence on the 4-hour within the context of the daily. You can see where recently the 4-hour Coppock curve has moved below the 16-hour Coppock curve around the same time that this occurred here. So that trend's still very bearish at this point. We are coming down in some pretty significant areas of possible support. So we're watching that S2 line, but right now, very bearish. US dollar, Canadian dollar, very similar looking chart. We're also at the S2 line, debating that line. But the same sort of situation. Chiku below the historical price curve. Price has moved below the daily Kumo. Bearish divergence on the Coppock curve on the daily, and the 4-hour Coppock curve is set inside that, so it's a bear within a bear. So again, very bearish as the US dollar continues to weaken this morning. And then last up, briefly, New Zealand dollar versus Canadian dollar is very bullish, as you can see. So the opposite of the other two pairs I just mentioned. We have a context of strength here with the price being above the daily Kumo with a flat line here on that Kumo, and also with the Coppock curve being above the zero line. Now you can see we have pulled back currently down to the pivot line, and our 4-hour is showing some slight bearish divergence. That said, that bearish divergence is still above the zero line on the 4-hour chart, so I'm expecting to see some kind of a bounce pretty soon on this pair. So watching that one for an intraday bounce and support around the area where it is right now. So quick rundown of a bunch of different pairs this morning. Hope you have a great day of trading, and hope you have a good weekend.